Welcome, gentlemen. As a reminder, head to mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes, to download a free report called Sticking Point Solved. And as always, you can talk to me for free for 25 minutes. Scheduling is easy. Just use the button in the upper right-hand corner.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Hello, gentlemen. Welcome yet again to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay, on both Clubhouse and Twitter. You can also find me at Real Scott McKay on Instagram. You can search Scott McKay on YouTube for the video representations of these podcasts and other goodies. The website, as always, is mountaintoppodcast.com, and be sure to join the Facebook group with all the like-minded men who are looking to get a great woman in their life or improve the relationship with the woman they have in their life already by searching out the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. Today, we're going to have a lot of fun. Listen. Just like Joe Namath infamously guaranteed Super Bowl III, hey, I can guarantee a victory on this show. Dr. Rick Kirschner is my guest, and I found his book, which has been out for 27 years now, but I just now stumbled across the book, and I knew I had to have this cat on my show. He's happily retired. As a matter of fact, don't say the four-letter W word around him, okay? It's work, but don't say that around him because he doesn't do that anymore. So, given that that's the case for him, I was absolutely thrilled that he agreed to be on this show. Hopefully this show feels more like play than the W word to him. And I'm assuming that's why he agreed to be on it to begin with. But hey, man, we're talking about one of his favorite subjects. And indeed, it is also the title of his book, which has been so wildly popular. It's been translated into 27 languages and updated and re-released as a second edition and a third edition as soon ago as 2012. The McGraw-Hill International best-selling book is called, get this, ready? Dealing with People You Can't Stand. How to Bring Out the Best in People at Their Worst. And man, if this isn't a topic all of us would really love to find some very clear and indeed practical answers on, man, I don't know what question there is that would trump it. So without anything further, my new friend, Dr. Rick Kirschner, all the way from Idaho. How's it going, man?
Hey, Scott. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, man, it was a pleasure to talk to you a couple days ago when we made each other's acquaintance, and we really had lots of laughs and really a lot of fun talking about, ironically enough, the subject of people you can't stand. Now, in my mind, I had a whole litany of people I can't stand. You know, people who only talk about themselves, people who call you only when they need something, people who are just obnoxious, people who are, I don't know, passive aggressive. All these people we try to play keep away with, right? I see here that the term you use to describe those sorts of people are the 10 most unwanted. And you have kind of a different list than I do. Talk to me about who these people we can't stand are, Rick. I think we're all ears.
All right. Well, so our 10 most unwanted were the ones that people told us about the most often during the years of my speaking and training career. We'll just start at the top with the toughest one, which is the tank. That's where you hear the tread coming down the hallway, and then their radar switches on as they look for a target. Doot, 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 doot. And if you show up in the crosshairs, you've got a problem. That's the tank attack. Then you got your sniper. We got two flavors of sniper. You got your hostile sniper and your friendly sniper. Hostile sniper has something against you and is trying to topple you. The friendly sniper just likes to tease you. But in both cases, they can draw blood. Then you've got the know-it-all. That's the person that knows 98% of anything. Just ask them. They'd be happy to tell you about it for hours on end, but they don't have a moment to listen to your clearly inferior ideas. And you've got the think they know it all. That's the person that knows the other 2%, but they figure, hey, that's pretty good. Then you've got the, who else do we have in this thing? You've got the yes person. That's the person that says yes when they mean maybe. You got the maybe person. That's the person that can't make up their mind. You got the no person. That's the person who thinks their job is to shoot down ideas. Anybody a spark of inspiration? Launch another one while I reload. Then you got the nothing person.
The nothing person.
Well, I know we don't like a lot of dead air on a show like this, so I can't really illustrate it for you. But nothing person's quite often the passive aggressive person that you say, what's going on? They go, nothing. And if you might say, well, your nothing sounds like something, they just give you nothing but silence. Then you've got
a bunch of married men are silently nodding with us right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny how people find their perfect match in relationship for some of these behaviors. Then you've got the whiner. That's the person that goes, everything's wrong, nothing's right. There's a plan for my life, but I'm not in it. So that's kind of an overview of the behaviors that people have the most trouble with. And over the years of my career, I even boiled that down a little further to 4 kinds of people: pushy, negative, wishy-washy, and disruptive. So, there's a lot of ways to talk about this, but at the end of the day, when you're talking about bad behavior, when you talk about people engaging in bad behavior, I think it's useful to have a mindset that helps you understand where they're coming from and what's likely to be effective with them if you have some outcome you'd like to achieve. But we do say that there are you have 4 choices when dealing with bad behavior. And this is true every time, all the time, for every single one of us. Your first choice is to stay and do nothing. And we include suffering and complaining in that category. So if you ever find yourself suffering and complaining to somebody and not doing anything about it, that's a choice. It's the least effective and most common choice people make. So still have 3 choices. Your second choice is to vote with your feet. And I don't mean you kick them, but I mean you turn around and walk away. And sometimes turning around and walking away is your best choice. I've been asked when I make that choice, and for me, it's real simple. If it makes no sense to be there right then, that's when I turn around and walk away. But you still have 2 more choices. Your third choice is to change your attitude about that person's behavior. That means they do what they do. You realize it's not about you. You quit taking it personally. And the fourth choice requires that third choice. And that fourth choice is to change what you're doing in order to get a different response from them.
I noticed there's no 5th option of beat the living crap out of them or shoot them.
Well, some people have other options that I don't have.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll just leave it at that. We don't want to start any blasphemous rumors on this show.
Well, I think of Sylvester Stallone in the movie Cobra, where he goes, "You're the disease, I'm the cure." That kind of thing.
Right.
For me, that's not really an option.
Yeah, we would love to go all Dirty Harry on people, but that's why it's a movie, not real life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And you know what? A second ago, you gave several motives. You rattled them off really quickly for why people would position themselves with us as so confrontational or hard to deal with or just really difficult to like. One of them that was conspicuous by its absence from that list was jealous. And that's the first thing I thought of when I think of people who are trying to snipe us or tear us down. They want something we want, and they're trying to diminish us so they can either get their grubby paws on whatever it is we have or, just so they look better. But you had a whole list, and I'd love for you to elaborate on those emotional states or mindsets that people impose upon us that really just irritate us. And I mean, if jealousy fits into the mix, so be it. If not, correct me. I'm all ears.
Fair enough. Well, so one of the things that we set out to do in the book was to figure out why is it that somebody can be, nobody knows who I am in one situation and then shut up in another situation. What accounts for the differences in the way people behave? A person could be a bully at work and a wimp at home, or a wimp at work and a bully at home. On Mondays, they could be really fun to talk to, and on Fridays, you can't get away from them fast enough. What accounts for these differences in behavior? And we came up with something we called the lens of understanding that identifies a good reason for bad behavior. So, for example, if somebody is being pushy, we say that the good reason for that is they're in a get it done mode. They're just trying to get to the end. Get it done, get it behind them, get it accomplished. And if they're attacking you or bullying you, it's because you're slowing them down or somehow they think you're in the way. I think that's useful to know that somebody's trying to get it done instead of being an a-hole. Because if you think they're an a-hole, you're going to treat them like an a-hole. If you think somebody's a jerk, how are you going to treat them? You're going to treat them like a jerk. And then how do they act whenever you're around? They seem to act like a jerk. We call that the nature of sanity, that whatever you assume to be true, you'll act like it's true. And the way you act will have such an influence that you'll find proof so that you can be right. And in our paradigm, being right is the booby prize. I don't know if you remember the booby prize. I'm pretty old. I'm going to be 72 in a couple
I'm familiar with the term.
Okay, so it's the prize the losers get. That's the booby prize. And everybody gets to be right. For me, the question is, do you want to be right or do you want to affect something? If what you want is to affect something, then the mindset that there's a good reason for bad behavior gives you a vector of approach. But if you just want to be right, you can tag them and bag them. You can call people names, label them something, cut them off, end the relationship, or suffer in silence. But if you want to get a better outcome, you need a better way of approaching it. So that's why we say 4 good reasons for bad behavior. Some people want to get it done. They become pushy. Some people want to get it right. And if they think it's going wrong, they become negative. Some people want to get along. And if they think they're not going to get along, they become wishy-washy and vague and hard to pin down. And some people want to get attention. They want to be appreciated. And if they're not feeling appreciated, they tend to escalate their behavior so you can't ignore them. That's what we call the lens of understanding. And I think that it gives you a way of dealing with people, of approaching people when they're behaving badly, besides hating on them.
Interesting.
And I'm not saying you can't hate on people. I'm just saying that if you want a different outcome, you have to do something different with your own behavior.
Well, man, I mean, hate just eats oneself from the inside.
That's right.
You know, it serves no outward purpose. It just destroys one's own psyche and one's own mindset. Several things come to mind while you were talking. First of all, how many times have we heard about the military officer who brings his work home to his wife and kids? Right? Yeah. I mean, such a no-no. And I think what you just talked about illustrated that phenomenon perfectly. I'm reminded of a time, and I'll tell you what, Rick, it's been so many years ago that I think I can freely talk about it. I don't think this cat's even in the space anymore. But I did an interview with him for my monthly subscribers, and he wrote a book called How to Win an Argument with Any Woman. And my very first question to him in this interview was, why in the world would you want to try to win an argument with a woman? Seems like a Pyrrhic victory to me. I mean, you've shut her down, then what?
Yeah.
And I caught the poor bastard flat-footed because, it's like, well, wait a minute. This book is for guys who want to have power over women and think they're all alpha. It wasn't for guys who think clearly. So we had a little bit of a problematic start to that interview, but we cleared it up. I was very diplomatic and congenial about it. And he had lots of good ideas, actually. It was kind of one of those cases where, like, you sell people based on what they want to hear and then you deliver what they actually need to hear. It was one of those deals in real life. But I'm also kind of intrigued by what you talked about and what you didn't talk about. This lens of understanding. What about the situations where it's all about a person's motives? Like they're acting a certain way because they need something from this situation. So they're going to nut up and be real alpha or be a little braver or more of a bull in a china shop to get what they want. Whereas in another situation where they're way more apathetic and they don't really need anything from whatever situation that is, they might just turn around and walk away, just turn on their heels and go because it just doesn't matter to them. Or what about the concept of social pecking orders, social status being at play there? Like, for example, I can bully people who I know are weaker than me. But if I get in front of someone who I'm intimidated by, I'm certainly not going to attempt to bully them because I have a different social status in that particular scenario. One of the things I've often said is the guy who's the most bullied person in school is probably being bullied by the kid who's the second most bullied kid in school. You know what I mean? Which kind of illustrates this pecking order phenomenon that I'm talking about. What say you?
Well, I happen to own some chickens, and the pecking order is a real thing. Somebody has to be dominant in a group of chickens, and they will chase each other around until someone surrenders. And I'm sure that there are situations where that is true, where people have to demonstrate their dominance. But again, if what you want is to get a result from that person, there's a way of getting it. And if what you want is to just dislike what they're doing, you can do that pretty easily. I've spent my entire career getting along with people and getting things done with people because that was good for my business. And in my marriage, I'm interested in getting along with my wife to the highest degree possible, as often as possible, because it means I get to be happy more often.
What's the difference between being complacent and conciliatory and perhaps being a wimp about it versus being assertive and making sure that when you have a point that needs to be made, it gets made, vis-a-vis the simple fact that that may cause conflict between people and you may not want to deal with each other afterwards?
Well, in a binary situation where it's either all this or all that, assertive or non-assertive would kind of be your options. But I think there's a range of options in there. And so let me illustrate this for you. So, I spent a lot of time on the road during my working life, and I'd be sometimes gone for 2-3 weeks. I'd call my wife every night from wherever I was, but I was on the road surrounded by strangers, and I couldn't really just be myself because I was a public person. So when I'd come home, when I get off the road, I just wanted to debrief and let go and, kind of settle back into being me without having to prove anything or demonstrate something to somebody. And I remember early on in my marriage, I'd come home and I'd sit down and I'd start telling my wife about my trip. I'd say, wow, I was in Lima, Ohio. And then she would interrupt and say something about the cats. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Anyway, I was in Lima, Ohio. And then she'd interrupt and say something else that had nothing to do with what I was saying. And it bothered me. It really irked me because I was trying to debrief and let go. And what I really thought I needed was for her to just listen to me and be supportive of me. And I had this whole idea about it. One day I'm sitting on the couch with her and I'm trying to debrief and she's talking about the cats and I'm talking about Lima, Ohio. And I just had an epiphany. I thought to myself, wow, maybe she wants to debrief too. She's been home for 2 or 3 weeks without anybody for her to debrief with. So instead of pressing on, I stopped and I said, you know what? Tell me everything about the cats and whatever. I'm all ears. And 5 minutes later, she's like, so tell me about your trip. And that became our habit. I'd come home and I'd listen to her for a few minutes, and then she was all ears for what I had to say. So that's what I mean by shifting your mindset. When you frame something in a different way, it opens up possibilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that way it's not a conflict. You're letting the person have their way for a while. And the law of reciprocity, which is well known in psychological circles, if the person's a decent person and they're not psychotic, it'll probably come to the forefront and they'll let you have your turn. Correct?
That's certainly in play in relationship. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. For me, this was more of it was such a massive aha for me because I've been happily married now for 31 years, and all of those niggling little problems you have in the first years of a real relationship fell away from us. We've just been able to enjoy each other's company on this ride of life now for many, many years. We don't get into those kinds of places. So one of the things that I would tell my audiences about and talked about in my books was this idea that if you have something to say, it's in your interest to listen before talking. That's just as a general rule. If you have something you want somebody to hear, then you should hear what they have to say first, because that way their mind won't be occupied with the thing they want to say while you're talking. You're not listening to me. You ever had somebody say, you're not listening to me, and you heard them say it?
Anybody who's married or been in a long-term relationship with a female human being has heard that phrase before.
If you heard them say it, clearly you are. So that could be a point of argument.
Well, there's hearing and tuning out and genuine listening. There's the difference there. That's where the dichotomy lies.
Yeah, I think there's a place where you go, well, what's missing here is the evidence that I'm listening. If somebody says, you're not listening to me, the thing that they would know as evidence that I'm listening is missing for them. So that's a great moment for me to just stop and really pay attention and provide that evidence. And sometimes that evidence is as simple as nodding your head and grunting occasionally and saying back some of what you just heard. Those kinds of things constitute evidence for people that they're being listened to. And in fact, I taught for years a very simple listening strategy that goes from the nonverbal, which is nodding your head, to the vocal, which is grunting occasionally, to the verbal, which is repeating back the actual words people use when they talk to you. So if somebody says, "You're not listening to me," I would nod my head. I go, so I'm not listening to you? How would you know if I was listening to you? And ask for that piece of evidence they're wanting. And then once they tell me and I've got that, I don't even have to listen anymore. I can just provide that evidence.
Yeah, the old Jedi mind trick there is typically repeat what they just said back to them.
Yeah.
With a note of understanding.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, everything we've sort of talked about so far, Rick, has been in the context of words and phraseology. But clearly, your frame of mind, your emotional state in the moment, and a lot of body language and nonverbals go into how well this is going to end for you and for the person you're talking to. Like in the example you just gave where you want to stop and say, I think I want to hear about what happened with you all day for 5 minutes. You wouldn't go, "Oh, you know what? By all means, let's just freaking stop everything and let you talk about what you want for the next 5 minutes. It's all you. Go right ahead. I'm all ears. Come on, let's have it. Do it." Because then you'll just get more resistance, right?
That's right.
With the eye rolling and the grand sweeping gesture and all that stuff. Like, "Oh, by all means, queen, whoever you are, out with it." Because then, she'll just retreat into her shell with that.
Well, so, there's a phenomenon in nature called resonance that we tend to match frequencies with things that we recognize as familiar. And you see this in all your relationships with everybody in your life when you're getting along. You match, you do things in a similar way. So, for example, if I'm sitting down and somebody I care about walks in and starts talking to me and they're standing, I'm either going to offer them a seat or I'm going to stand up to talk with them because it just feels awkward to have one up and one down. But if it's somebody I can't stand and they're standing and I'm sitting and I don't know any of these things that we're talking about today, I'd probably remain seated and dislike the fact that they were standing. So that idea of resonance or blending or matching or rapport building is fundamental to successful relationships. You have to meet people where they are instead of waiting for them to come to where you are. Now, I'll say this again, that if you don't care how it goes, then you can do anything you want. But if you want a good result, you have to be flexible enough to meet people where they are. You have to be able to adapt your own behavior to the situation before you. So with blending, we have the way people look, their facial expression. We have their body posture. We have the kind of gestures they make. And if somebody has a predictable pattern of behavior, like maybe they use their right hand whenever they're making a point, their left hand whenever they have a question, and you notice that, you could match that behavior when you have a point or a question, and it would be familiar to them. And that makes you an insider to their reality on a subconscious level. So that kind of matching or mirroring or blending, whatever you want to call it, I like calling it blending, that idea of just kind of finding some domain of common behavior that sends the signal, I'm with you. And let me put it this way. I believe in every moment of every interaction with every person, for every single one of us, we're all looking and listening for the answer to one question. You with me? We all want to know. You with me? We're looking for proof. We're listening for proof. You with me? You with me? We want to know. We don't even say it out loud. We're just trying to find proof of it. So the idea of matching, mirroring, or what I call blending is that you provide that proof that you're with people, that you're on their side, that you're in their paradigm, that you're somebody that makes sense to them, and you do it by observing their behavior and then finding some things in your own behavior that you can do in a similar way. Now, if you do too much of this, it doesn't work. So for me, there's a basic rule in all relationship, and the rule is a little goes a long way. If you do too much, it's self-defeating, and people call it mimicking, mocking, aping, parroting. Those are all negatives. But a little, just a little, if I'll give you an example of this. I know many years ago in my practice with a patient, she had had developed an ulcer. And it seemed pretty obvious to me it was related to her work situation, because she was telling us that she worked with a guy who hated her and that was always taking shots at her whenever she tried to speak up in a meeting, and sexist shots. Like, he'd make sexist jokes whenever she tried to say anything, and it really offended her and it hurt her feelings. And then she'd shut down, and so she wound up internalizing all that stress. So when I heard about this, I thought, well, here's a simple thing you could try. I said, when he's in the room, where do you sit? She says, as far away from him as I possibly can. I said, next time, try to sit next to him. She's like, ew, why would I do that? I said, because you can send signals if you're sitting next to him. So here's what you do. Whenever he nods his head, I want you to count to 3 and then nod your head. Whenever he taps his finger on the table, I want you to nod to 3 and then tap your toes. Find some way of matching his behavior, and that's it. Don't change anything else, and tell me what happens. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, they're friends, they're colleagues, and they get along great. And he asks her out for a date. So
that's something.
Yeah, that's that idea of resonating with people. And it's fundamental to successful relationships. So whether you're trying to build a relationship with somebody you care about, or you're trying to build your business and your customers need to know you care about them, you have to signal to them, I'm with you, non-verbally, to let them know. You also have to do this vocally. And when we talk about vocal blending, we're talking about things like voice tempo. Some people are fast talkers, some people are slow talkers, and this is situation dependent, right? So I'm on your show. Clearly, we're talking at a pretty brisk clip here. Do you talk like this when you're just hanging out, when you're sitting back and having a beer with somebody? I'm guessing.
But I'm from the East Coast originally, and I have slowed way the heck down since relocating to Tejas. I've worked on enunciation and not slurring my words. My cadence with which I talk nowadays is so much slower and more calculated than when I was growing up as an East Coaster. It's funny you should say that we're talking at this rapid clip, because you're out in the big sky country, living the dream up there, with the log cabin and the hot cocoa and the wood burning stove and everything. We're still way quicker than you down here in Texas, apparently.
Well, I was in business with a guy from New York for 26 years.
Yeah, okay.
So I know how to move at a faster pace because of him.
Well, anyway, I know exactly what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, I would say it's no coincidence that this tactic of blending or mirroring, as you talk about, is a favorite amongst guys who coach men and women on how to interview effectively.
Yeah.
It's almost trite advice to say to someone, hey, when you go into an interview, mirror their body language, mirror their cadence, this, that, and the other. And when you think about it, the goal of a job interview is really the same as the one you just cited. I want to build commonality. I want to communicate or subcommunicate, whether it's verbally or non-verbally, whatever, to this person who's interviewing me that, I want to be on your team. I'm one of you. You should have me on board. And that's why it's so psychologically powerful. Indeed. I'm reminded also of a story from years ago. I don't even remember how I happened across it, but I love 60s and 70s era correct television and movies, and I'm just a big fan of it. And there's a story from way back in early television. Yeah, not so early, probably 59, 60, 61, where there was a game show, and it was on live television. And the host was a gentleman who was legendary in game show host circles. Anybody who's under 50 won't remember him. He's even really before my time, but his name was Bill Cullen, and he was a very, very successful game show host. And there was a show he was hosting, a variety show or a game show or something. And one thing about Bill Cullen is you never really saw him move on screen, and you never really saw him but from the shoulders up, because he was a game show host. But he walked on stage and he had polio, and it had affected his walking gait dramatically. And I don't remember which goofball comedian from the late 50s or early 60s it was exactly. It may have been Alan King, would have been a great example of who it might have been, because he was just such a goofball guy, right? And when Cullen walked out on stage, Alan King started imitating his walk because he thought Cullen was pulling a bit on him. And his wife is recounting how absolutely mortified she was watching this happen on live television. the cameras have it all cropped out. So they're just showing the guys, as they walk out. You remember how shows would do this. They would show a guy coming from stage left, and then the camera would show the guy coming from stage right, and it's really cropped out head and shoulders, and they're waving. That's what was going on here. But Alan King was walking like Cullen to be funny because he thought Cullen was being funny. And of course, like I said, Alan King or whoever it was, his wife was mortified. Oh my God, this is humiliating. And then at the end, it turns out that as soon as Alan King had realized the gravitas of what he had done, he was equally mortified. And so the story goes, Cullen had such a great sense of humor and had such self-awareness, and, his self-esteem was perfectly intact. He just bursted out laughing and thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen or heard about in his entire life. And he himself told the story years into the future. Because, Alan King, the look on his face when he realized that Cullen had polio was priceless. He just felt awful about it, and Cullen just burst out laughing. And so, that's a primo example of when you overdo it or when you don't think it through too much, and maybe you're mirroring or you're, blending in a way that probably wasn't appropriate. And I think that sometimes can get the best of us, but I think most of us, as we mature, we have kind of a field sense about that, don't we?
Well, I used to tell a story not unlike that about myself when I was seeing patients, because when I first learned about this idea of blending with people, of mirroring their behavior, I was super excited to try it out because the doctor-patient relationship typically is doomed from the outset. Think about it. When the patient meets the doctor knows all kinds of things about the patient. Patient knows nothing about the doctor. The doctor calls the patient by their first name. Patient would never dream of calling the doctor by their first name.
I do, though.
Say what?
I do, though. I have that pact with my doctor. I call my doctor Sawbones, and she laughs. No, we call each other by the first name. I made that pact with her. I will play those games.
Relationship.
Yeah. Right.
So you can do that, but I'm talking about when you first meet. It's not a normal behavior to call the doctor by their first name. Doctors usually
Agreed.
Standing, patients usually sitting, doctors wearing clothing, patients wearing paper. They have pretty much nothing in common. And one of the things we know in medicine is that patient outcomes are usually pretty poor in healthcare because there's so much difference that divides these people. So when I learned about mirroring, I was super excited to try it out. And I had a chair behind the reception desk, and I pulled it out to meet my new patient in the waiting room and sat down across from my patient. And I leaned forward and I said, "Hi, my name is Rick Kirschner. What's your name?" And I knew their name. I had their paperwork, but I extended my hand. We shook hands. The patient said his name. I said, "Well, let's go on down to the examining room and see what the problem is." And he stood up and I stood up and we began walking. And that's when I noticed he had a limp. So I limped with him down to the examining room. He took a seat. I took a seat. He leaned forward. I leaned forward. He goes, "Are you mocking me?" I was like, "No, I'm mirroring you." And he goes, "Well, knock it off." I learned that if you do too much of this, it's self-defeating, that you don't need to try that hard. You just need to identify some common behavior that you can engage in with people to let them know that you're with them.
This doctor wasn't Dr. House, was he?
No.
He famously had a grumpy personality and a limp, so I had to bring that up. You mentioned being a student of martial arts. Talk to me about conflict Aikido.
Well, conflict Aikido is a wonderful model for dealing with difficult situations with people where you're kind of butting heads with somebody. The basic idea in Aikido is that you don't use force. You use the force being directed at you. You don't bring any of your own force to it. So if you ever see a martial artist doing Aikido, it's almost like they're directing traffic on a one-way street. You want to go that way? Whee, there you go. So
redirection.
Exactly, redirection. And that's the whole idea of it. So I break it down like this. The first step in conflict Aikido is to accept what's going on. Accept the unacceptable. It doesn't mean you agree with it. It doesn't mean you approve of it. It means you recognize that it is what it is and it ain't what it ain't. And that's how it is. So somebody's yelling, they're yelling. Somebody's whining, they're whining. That's how it is. You accept it. Second part is you find a way to blend with them, to move with them. And so if somebody's coming towards me and I want to blend with them, I'm going to move backwards as they're moving towards me, just blending in that movement. I wouldn't move towards them if they're moving towards me. That would be considered an aggressive act. but we would both start moving in the same direction. And that buys you the time to take charge over that energy they're directing at you and direct it where you want it to go. So let's talk about this idea of where you want it to go. I think that successful interactions with people happen when you have a desired outcome, when you know where you're trying to go. So you want more intimacy in your relationship, then knowing that you engage in behaviors that lead to more intimacy. You want more connection, then knowing that you engage in behaviors that lead to that. When people are behaving badly, I think it's important to know what you want to have happen, not just what you don't want, but what you do want. I told a story for years and years and years. It's the peanut butter story. I bet you've heard this story somewhere. I shared an office with a guy who was completely predictable. You could set your watch by him. I always knew it was lunchtime because 12 o'clock on the dot, I'd hear the door at the bottom of the stairs open. I'd hear his labored footsteps coming up the stairwell. He'd make his way slowly across the office, sit down behind his desk, reach underneath it, pull out a lunchbox, set it on his desk water in the same place he'd put it for the last 15 years, double click the lid, reach in, pull out a sandwich, unwrap the sandwich like he was peeling a banana, and then he'd make a face at his food. And this was every single day. And then he'd look over at me and he'd tell me what it was as if I wanted to know. He'd go, "It's peanut butter again, Rick." And then he'd eat it every single day. "Peanut butter again, Rick." And he'd eat it. After 2 months, he'd had all the peanut butter I could take, and I decided to get involved. I said, "Hey, Dave, if you don't like those sandwiches, why don't you ask your wife to make you something different?" He goes, "My wife, I make these sandwiches." And I learned something that day. I learned that if all you know is what you don't want, you will get more of it. So when I say know what you want, well, this is how that works. So I say knowing what you do want is your desired outcome. Where are we going? What am I going to do with this situation? If you have that in mind, rather than the peanut butter again thing, you've got a shot at it, at exercising influence, at creating the opportunity to bring out the best in somebody at their worst.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of rhymes with people just falling into a trap, really. I call it the suburban sleepwalk here in America. People want a nice, safe, predictable life. They don't like drama. They don't like uncertainty. So we just get a house in a nice, safe neighborhood in suburbia, and we get a big screen TV and we watch everybody else have all the breathtaking adventures because that would be too much for our heart to handle. What you're talking about also kind of rhymes with if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time, which involves goal setting, and knowing what you want is something a lot of people don't think far ahead enough about in life to even have a notion about. So fantastic. I love it. Kind of wrapping up here, the last thing I want to ask you, kind of as a culmination to this whole conversation, is the one that's burning a hole in my imagination. And that's, how do you prepare yourself ahead of time when you know you're about to have a meetup with someone you know you can't stand? What can you do? And that could be a man or a woman. And I mean, sometimes what goes along with that is, okay, this woman's incredibly attractive to me. I know these guys are going to relate to this one. And yet we don't really get along. And I just feel like she has one up on me because I think she's so hot and I'm so flabbergasted by her beauty. And does she even know that? But, you know, really, for whatever reason, you know you're about to get into an interaction with someone you'd rather not really interact with. You don't know how to interact with. You're intimidated by potentially interacting with them. You know, how do you prep?
Well, this is the reason why I believe we have this playground in our mind. We have a place where we can practice new skills, new behaviors.
A mental sandbox, as it were.
Exactly right. I'll tell you a fun story. I hopefully won't take too long with this. So many, many years ago, I was asked by Florence Minshall if I could be her MC, her master of ceremonies for melodrama in the tiny town of Talent, 10 miles north of my town of Ashland at the time. I had gotten to know Florence when I played Scrooge in a Christmas play. My daughter played Tiny Tim, and we had a really nice relationship. She called me up one midsummer's night and said, "Hey, could you come down here on Friday night and MC the melodrama?" I said, "Well, I've never done that. What's it involve?" She says, "Well, you teach people to hooray the hero and boo the villain and tell a joke maybe and introduce the next scene." I said, "Wow, that sounds like it's not even work. Sure, I'm happy to do that." Well, a lot of times people tell you things and it turns out it's a little more complicated than what they tell you, because I'll never forget that night. I walked out on that stage thinking it was that simple. And instead, what I found was 15 people in the middle of an audience of 200 people that had come together, and their ringleader was the father of the heroine in the play, and they were drunk. And he was yelling things out at her during the play that she would have preferred not having yelled out in front of an audience. Like, her nickname from childhood was Moose. She's yelling, Moose! When she comes out on stage, and it was derailing her, and it was derailing the cast because the cast was feeling sympathy for her, and nobody wanted to go out there anymore, including me. But I kept going out and trying to, just get through the next scene. Finally, I stopped. In the middle of the whole thing, I just stopped. And I looked at these 15 people, and particularly the ringleader, her dad. And I said, we've got a house full of people here that paid for a nice night of family entertainment. And I made an appeal for decency. I said, you can hooray the hero and boo the villain, but this isn't really necessary or helpful. They worked awfully hard to learn this material to do this play tonight. Please behave yourself. Well, I learned something valuable that night. I learned that if you position yourself between a sniper and the target, you become the target. So in a way, what I did really worked because they left her alone and waited for me. And then they just would unload it. And 2/3 of the way through the play, I was defeated. I couldn't take anymore. I was humiliated. I lived in a small town. I knew people in that audience. I couldn't take it anymore. I remember looking at that guy and saying, I don't need this kind of abuse because I'm a professional. And then I walked off the stage, got my pickup truck and drove home, all the while playing what had happened over and over in the privacy of my own mind so I didn't miss out on the badness of it. So I got home, and I had a rule in my life at that time because we had a kid in the house that if something upset me outside of the house, I didn't bring it into the house. I'd sit out in the driveway and work my way through it. So, and they knew this. They'd bring me food. My daughter came out for a kiss goodnight. I'm sitting in the car. I'm thinking, what else could I have done? How else could I have handled that? What are people going to say about me tomorrow when they talk about this? I'm in a small town. They're going to go, Kirschner the quitter. I'm like, what else could I have done? And I couldn't think of a thing. But then I thought, who do I know that would have known how to deal with that situation? And immediately I thought of my little brother, Gary. My little brother, Gary, would have loved to have been me in that situation. I thought, what does he know that I don't know? And the answer is he knows all these things you can say back. I didn't know any of them. I was brought up a nice, polite kid in Cincinnati. My little brother, Gary, knew all these things you can say back that really are funny and harmful. So I went to the library the next day and I got a book called Galaxy of Quips, Quotes, and Puns. And I memorized 20 things that you can say back. And then I called Florence and I said, hey, Florence, could I MC the melodrama next Friday night? And she goes, Rick, you left the stage. I'm like, I know, but please. And I tried whining, and sometimes whining does work. And she let me do it again. And I prayed for a heckler because I had 20 things in my head that I really wanted to try. Now, when I say I had him in my head, it's not exactly true. I had him in my body because in my mind, I practiced using them in that situation. I imagined the 15 drunks. I imagined the things they were saying. And then I would say one of these things. And then I'd imagine them. And then I'd say one of these things. So I was well rehearsed. And I got lucky. There was a guy in the front row that had heard about the previous Friday night, and he took a shot at me. And instead of being offended or hurt, I was like, psych. Slowly I turned inch by inch, locked on target. I pointed at the guy. I said, I don't know if y'all can see the guy that said that. And I described him, and people were craning their necks to see that guy instead of looking at me. I said, he was abandoned by wolves as a child and raised by his parents. That's why he's like that. And the audience chuckled. And then all 19 that were left just came tumbling out of my mouth. And here's what was really fun for me. That guy loved this. The heckler loved my heckles. In fact, he was writing them down to use on other people. So I practiced them in my mind, and they were real for me. And so what I tell people that are stepping into a situation that they're uncomfortable about is rehearse. Practice, go in the sandbox, that playground in your mind, and try on new skills, try on new behaviors. Imagine what they're going to do. Imagine how you're going to respond. Here's how you know you're ready to use a weapon. You want to.
And you're trained on it. Yeah. That's a brilliant story. And it really drives home the importance of learning the art of being quick on your feet. Such an impressive skill. And it indeed is a learned skill. You know what I mean?
It sure is.
And, one of the points that you alluded to there that I really think needs to be underscored is when you're dealing with someone who's difficult, they often know they're difficult and they like it, and game respects game. I actually had a boss who was probably what you would describe as a tank. Okay. She was a hard driver. She wanted results. She didn't want your input, do it her way or the highway. And she had mostly men working for her who were wimps in her presence. They were just yes men, like, okay, I'll do it. And even when she made completely unreasonable demands that basically guaranteed their failure, they would just go along with it. And one day I remembered an interaction I had had with a real fast talking, hard driving Texan guy when I was a young man running a nonprofit organization in the deep south of Texas. This guy was like Brad Pitt's character in Inglourious Bastards, if you can imagine that. Okay. And he would come in and say, all right, now, you know what? Drop everything, young man. Listen to me, because I have a few things here I got to say to you. And I want to make sure I am completely understood. Are you going to do this, or are you just going to sit around on your ass all day and pretend some more? Right. And I would go, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And one day I got sick of him coming and barking at me about a job he didn't know anything about. And I said, all right, you know what? You can tell me to do this all you want, and you can sit here and bark at me about it, but here are a few things you ought to know. I do this and I do that. You don't even see me preparing this way, because if I would have done it your way, here's why it would fail miserably, and I'd look like an idiot, and so would you for supporting me. And the guy rocked back on his feet, looked at me like I had three heads, wrinkled his nose at me, looked at me up and down, and he goes, okay, I hear you, but what if you did it like this or like that or like this instead? And I looked him up and down, wrinkled my nose, and said, because if I did it that way, it would fail in this way and in this regard, and that's why I do it this way. And at least it's working, whereas your idea wouldn't work at all. He goes, okay, I'm glad we had this little talk. I'm crystal clear. You have a nice day. And he walked out. And I forever knew how to handle that guy. And I mean, my job was on the line there. My job was on the line with this particular ball-busting boss, but I never forgot what happened when I responded to that tank, that steamroller type of guy, in kind. And one day it just occurred to me to do that with my boss. And really, she overcompensated. All of a sudden, I was her favorite. I was like the teacher's pet, because I talked to her the way she talked to me. She respected me immediately, would give me everything on a silver platter. And it was really embarrassing and made my peers really resent me. Now, in one short phrase, she was a terrible boss. Okay. I remember she finally got fired for good reason. She was awful. And a year or so later, she actually called me for a reference. And I was floored by that. I was like, you got to be kidding.
But that's the way of it, right?
Yes. That's exactly how it works. Yeah, I love it. Fantastic stuff. We could talk all day about this, but time is short. So I want to send you guys to Amazon so you can grab a copy of this fantastic book, Dealing with People You Can't Stand: How to Bring Out the Best in People at Their Worst, where you'll find out about other such gems as Pygmalion power, polarity response, junkologic, which, I really am curious about myself, gentle confrontation, and much more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you to a URL that I've set up for you as always, which is www.mountaintoppodcast.com/can't stand without the apostrophe. How about that? That's memorable. CANTSTAND. And when you go there, you can buy Dr. Rick Kirschner's book and lap it up like a kitten does milk, proverbially, I hope, not literally. And I will also put that book at the top of my queue on my Amazon influencer page at mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon, along with a couple other gems of literature that are written by Dr. Rick Kirschner that I am sure you'll enjoy as well. What a fun conversation. I love these stories and these examples. And, I feel more prepared to deal with people who I'd rather not deal with. And I'm sure these guys do too. Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Rick Kirschner. Certainly enjoy your retirement up in Idaho, and come back and see us again real soon.
Thanks so much, Scott. Really fun talking with you today.
Yeah, man, so much so. Great show. And guys, go ahead and visit mountaintoppodcast.com, not only so you can get your hands on Dr. Rick Kirschner's book, but also so you can sign up to talk to me for 25 minutes for free. More of you guys have been talking to me lately as summer unwinds and we get closer to fall. People are starting to get their nose on the grindstone and look to getting the right woman in their life and to up-level whatever they're doing with their life in general. People are looking to get on with whatever their new normal is going to be. If that fits your description, talk to me for free for 25 minutes by clicking the red button at the upper right-hand corner at mountaintoppodcast.com. Also visit the good folks at Origin in Maine and Hero Soap. Both of those companies are devoted to making you a better man by either putting you in the best boots and jeans you've ever worn, giving you the best protein powder and supplements you've ever tried, and or giving you the best body wash and or soap you've ever tried. All of those fine products are there for you from the mountaintoppodcast.com site when you click on the appropriate link. I have banners there for both Origin in Maine and Hero Soap, or you can simply go to mountaintoppodcast.com /origin or /Hero Soap, respectively, to check out the merchandise for yourself. And when you do, be sure to use the code MOUNTAIN10 with either of our sponsors to get an additional 10% off. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.